The Taínos of the Northern Caribbean islands were originally descended from among the Arawak-speaking peoples dwelling on the northeast coast of South America near the Orinoco River in Venezuela. With the use of dugout canoes, and the South American Arawak slowly made their way up the Caribbean chain to the northern Caribbean islands in the Greater Antilles, where they eventually became known as the Taínos. It should also be noted that some researchers suggest that other Native Americans had settled the Caribbean from points in North America, Central America, and South America before the arrival of the Arawak, Taínos, Lucayans, and Caribs. Nevertheless, it was the indigenous Lucayan, Taínos, and Caribs who dominated the region at the time of Columbus, but later suffered at the hands of European explorers. When Columbus arrived in the Americas, the natives of Hispaniola identified themselves as Taíno, which means good or noble. This name was later used by Europeans to distinguish the island Arawaks from the South American Arawaks. By 1492, the Taínos had settled all of the larger islands of the Northern Caribbean or Greater Antilles, that is Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Cuba, and Jamaica. Today, the Taínos of Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and Eastern Cuba are referred to as Classic Taíno. Those of Central Cuba and Jamaica are classified as Western Taíno, while those of northernmost part of the Lesser Antilles, just east of Puerto Rico, are called the Eastern Taíno. It is important to note that the language and culture varied among these Taíno groups. The Taíno of Hispaniola called their enemies from the east, Caribs. The name Carib means strong or brave person. Any Caribs in here? It is also the name from which the names Caribbean and Caribbean Sea is derived. However, these island Caribs originally called themselves Kalinago. They didn't call themselves Caribs, they called themselves Kalinago in their native man's language. The name Carib was later imposed on these native islanders by European outsiders. Now I remember that clearly because I called them Caribs. I made that mistake in my first draft, and my historical content editor corrected me strongly. They were Kalinagos, you know, and it's good when you research your history, you get to appreciate what really took place, you know. The Caribs had already settled a number of Caribbean islands between Guadeloupe and St. Vincent in the Windward Islands of the Caribbean, and were steadily migrating northward along the eastern Caribbean chain toward Greater Antilles by the time Columbus arrived. Caribs were a warfaring people known to capture Taínos from the Greater Antilles as prisoners of war, which added to the influx of Arawak speakers to Carib communities. One thing I learned in the research, and I don't know if it worked here, but I found out that the Caribs, the men spoke their own language, and the women spoke, am I correct, Doc? They spoke different languages. So I guess when the men wanted to speak coded talk, they speak in such a way that the women don't understand, and I understand that they hung out together. You know, I don't know if we need to revert or we keep it as is, but it's quite interesting. Columbus assumed the Caribs were cannibals. And this is an important point that was raised. Columbus assumed that the Caribs were cannibals based on the initial description given him by the Taínos of Hispaniola of their Carib raiders. The name Carib came from the Taíno words Cariba and Caniba. The name Carib eventually became synonymous with the word cannibal or man-eater. However, Europeans had no first-hand account of Caribs being cannibalistic predators or New World savages, other than that which might have been associated with the ritual eating of relatives after they died. Might. Based on the account Columbus received from the Taíno people, Columbus assumed that the Caribs were man-eaters. Nevertheless, the notion of Caribs being cannibals gave Columbus and his contemporaries some justification to enslave them. Hundreds of Caribs were therefore captured and transported as slaves to Hispaniola. Like the Arawaks, the island Caribs also originated from the northern shores of South America. Although they spoke Cariban, their language belonged to the same broad Arawakan language of the Taínos of Hispaniola and the Arawaks of South America. Caribs still exist today in countries near the north coast of South America, such as Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, and French Guiana. And they also exist today, I think about 3,000 of them in Dominica, where their culture still survives. Populating the Americas. Several theories suggest how the Americas were populated by the ancient spread of civilization. The most credible of these theories indicate that human civilization first reached the Americas from East Asia, that's coming out of Russia, which corresponds with the archaeological finds and DNA data collected by National Geographic's Genographic Project. The Genographic Project is a research initiative that traces the ancestry of human genes to determine migration paths of ancestors of modern-day humans. The widely accepted land bridge theory, also called Beringia, suggests that the ancient trek of human civilization began on the continent of Africa and then made its way through the continents of Asia and Europe before crossing the Bering Land Bridge that once joined Russia and Alaska. Ancient civilization then trekked southward through North, Central, South America, and South America. Upon reaching South America, an offshoot of this spreading civilization, an Arawak-speaking people, island hopped their way northward from the north coast of South America along Tellis, and let me jump again. Eventually settling Hispaniola, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Jamaica. Other New World explorers. We spoke about the Columbus, but there are claims of other Europeans and persons of other continents coming to the Americas before Columbus did. So I'll just make a point on that. Prior to Columbus's arrival in the Americas, Leif Erikson, a Norseman, sailed west to North America from Greenland during a maritime expedition. Erikson made a landfall on Newfoundland, Canada, some 500 years before Columbus in 1000 AD. However, Erikson's contact with Native Americans was short-lived and did not affect any lasting change on the destiny of the Americas or the world as we know it today. Other scholars suggest that Africans, Chinese, and other Europeans had arrived in the Americas before Columbus did. They said that the Chinese also sailed through the Bahamas, crossed the Atlantic to the Bahamas, and that theory was suggested by a British naval officer from Britannia Royal Naval College, where I attended. So we're going to have a little clash. We're going to have a little clash at sea. Unlike the short-lived encounter Native Americans had with the Norsemen or with any other foreign explorer, most researchers agree that it was the historic meeting between Columbus in the plane that ultimately led to the transformation of the Americas, which forever changed the course of history and human destiny. The organizers of the 1992 Smithsonian Seeds of Change exhibit described the encounter between two humankind that diverged from each other. As such, the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands mark the spot where the permanent reunion of civilizations as well as the unfolding of the modern Americas took place. Over the last 200 years, historians have debated which island the Bahama archipelago is the actual site of Columbus's first landfall in the Americas. And I found out that site. I spoke to Mr. Eris Monka from Cat Island, that big debate. I called him on the hotline. I gave him an update on the latest. After he finished talking to me, I'll tell you the conclusion I came to as I go on. I've learned how to become a politician. At least 8 or more possible sites in the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands have since been proposed. In the Bahamas, these sites include Watlings Island, which now carries the name San Salvador, along with Samana Key and Cat Island, which are all located in the central Bahamas. Other sites that are disputed to be Columbus's first landfall are found in the Turks and Caicos Islands. These sites include East Caicos. However, some argue that there is no archaeological evidence to support this claim for the Turks and Caicos Islands. Sorry, Turks. To date, the archaeological excavation unnamed where 15th century Spanish paraphernalia exists alongside Lucayan items is on present-day San Salvador Island in the Bahamas. And I believe, Dr. Turney, you were part of that. Let's give her a round of applause for the great discovery.
It was 10 years. He excavated from 1983 to
10, wow. Awesome. About the beautiful location of Columbus flag somewhere in there it took place, thus resulting in a shared heritage between the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands. As you all may be aware, we're part of the same geographical chain, and we are technically one. And I've been down to Turks and Caicos Islands, and it's hard to tell the difference. There's a slight accent, but similar to some of our family islands, the further south you go, the more tense the accent becomes. And so we have employed people in the Defense Force with with a unique accent, and we use them as code talkers where we want to transmit our secret messages. A quest for gold. Upon making inquiries about where gold could be found, the Lucayans pointed south-southwest towards Cuba. That's a smart move. Where's the money? Which Columbus presumed to be Sipangu, which is Japan. After spending 15 days sailing through the islands in the central and southern Bahama chain, Columbus headed in a southwesterly direction, eventually arriving off the north coast, which he identified as China. Well, isn't it amazing when you have strong desires how you can think the islands of the Bahama chain? Although Columbus claimed these islands on behalf of Spain in 1492 from as early as 1629. However, the British made no real effort to settle the islands until 1648. Columbus died, believing he had discovered a new route to the East Indies by sailing west from Spain. And I